My name is Joe Finney, and I am the developer of Simple QR Code Maker. And you are.
I am not the developer of Simple QRK. I am Matt Lacey. I spend far too much time thinking about XAML, is how I describe it.
And I know that about you. Um, and so I'm an app developer mainly just because I like solving little problems. After I've been working on this, I don't know, first few months now, I kind of took a step back and I was like, all right, functionally, it's where I want it to be. But when I look at that XAML, I mean, as if you evaluate kind of like the health of a XAML file as how far indented it is, it is it's very indented. Um, so I thought, I don't really know what is the best way to take an app that's in the store. It's an app that functions. It's okay. It's built for a purpose. And how can I actually go in there, improve the XAML to be more code friendly, to be more editable, to be more maintainable? You spent a lot of time thinking about XAML, and I knew you'd be the guy to help me out with that. So,
Okay, yeah. So to completely spoil the illusion, yeah. So yes, your app. I have used your app. It's a lovely app. You've got good reviews. Um, I assume lots of downloads. I can't really tell from the store, but it seems quite popular. So that's good. Well done. Um, but yes, I had a little look at the code, and the XAML definitely has, let's say, room for improvement. And that's not a dig on you. That's a dig on the way everyone is taught to write XAML, I think. So we can certainly go through and look at making some simple changes, but hopefully they'll greatly improve the maintainability of the code. That's kind of
yeah,
my it's kind of my guiding principle when I'm looking at UI code. I try to treat the code for the UI like the code for the rest of the app. I will say lots of things, I'm sure, which are like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. I do that for my C sharp. I do that for whatever other languages you use all the time. And yeah, if you had any code file which was really long and the indentations went really far, it should be raising sort of little red flags or concerns. And so we'll see about maybe reducing some of those, I think.
I think a lot of people are maybe in this position where they have a tool that they made and it works. And so they're like, why would I change it if it's good enough? And to your point, you change it because when you go back and you want to add features, it's going to be easier to add features. You're going to be able to make enhancements and upgrades faster, more reliably, and reuse maybe more of your XAML. Is that what you're saying?
I think for this situation, what we can do is we can go in and see about how doing things differently, and that will hopefully make it easier to make changes without any unintended consequences in the future. But also, it will show you a different way of thinking about XAML, so that when you write your next app or your next bit of code, you don't do it long form and then refactor it. You can just go straight into this is what I want to achieve, and
Mm-hmm.
go straight into that. So hopefully, you'll be able to write the shorter version more quickly in the future as well.
Perfect. I love it. All right, I'm going to share a whiteboard here,
Ooh.
and I'm going to give a quick little overview of what Simple QR Code Maker is, how it looks. This whole view is actually a split view, and this is the content page that we're looking at, and this history button over here on the side pops over with a pane, and that shows the history of previous QR codes. And mind you, as I'm describing this, everything that I'm talking about is in one giant XAML file. So it's it definitely needs some work. So there's a history pane that slides out, and then there's obviously the main text area right here. And this is where you insert your URLs. This is content. And then there's some options down here. And these are like how you change the color of the QR code and the background color. And then you kind of combine those two things and you get the main QR code is here and here. And these are repeated, I think, in a grid view. And they also have context menus that fly out and allow you to save out the QR code as either an SVG or a PNG. But if you want to save all the files, that's down here at the bottom. These just navigate to different pages. So that jumps over to another XAML file for read QR codes and settings. So what we're going to focus on right now is mainly the XAML file for this page, which I believe is called main page.
Yeah, let's look at the file. You know, You kind of hinted to I've got one file and it's got everything in it, and lots of people do that with their XAML. But if you think about, if I said, "Oh, I've made this C# class and it's got everything for my app in it," you'd be like, "Whoa, hang on a minute. Why would you do that? Doesn't that make it hard to maintain? Doesn't that lead to other problems?"
Right.
And so we're definitely going to end up with more than one file here. And this one file we have is going to get smaller. I can promise you that.
Yeah, that
even if I just jump in and delete stuff.
Yeah, no, that's good. That totally makes sense. And if we look right now, if we navigate, so we're in the simple QR code file maker project, and then we go on down to views, and we're editing the main page here right now. Again, as I was thinking, like, all right, what am I going to do to this app? I know it's going to be more controls and less in this one giant file. So we look right now, let's see the state of the art. Yeah. 407 lines.
Right. So let's go slowly through this file and just have a sort of an overview of what we've got. I know you scrolled through it quickly, and I just think for anyone else watching, this is all public on GitHub, isn't it? So anyone who wanted can go and have a look as well. Why don't you take us slowly down through the files? So we've got some resources, some converters, kind of common ones, nice long names. We might get onto naming. Okay. You've got a single style for this page. Okay. And we'll come back to buttons, I'm sure. And then we've got the split view. So let's look down. So your split view, you put it on the right, and that's what does it's not like the navigation style split view where we see it coming on the left by default. You've got it coming on the right. And it's size. Then we've got, in the content, we've got a grid view with a scroll viewer, with a stack panel, Okay. As we see some orientation, kind of standard, some spacing, some margins, some sizing on the text box. Lots of stuff going on. A mixture of events and commands in here as well, just for fun. So we've got so we can see that the text box has some events wired into it. The button below it has commands wired up. So we've got some of the functionality in the code behind, some of it in the view model. And I'm sure we will come to talk about more about that as we go on. So we've got other things here. We've got lots of properties on all these buttons. So we've got lots of sizing and margins and padding. Weird things like a padding where the margin just comes off the bottom for some reason. Okay, we've got another button which looks very, very similar. So 2 buttons there. Further down, now we've got another stack panel. Hang on, this one's horizontal as well. Wasn't the one above it horizontal?
Yes, so I think this one is for the text entry box where you put the URLs and the button.
Oh, okay.
And then this one is the options below where the color pickers are. Yeah. So these are the 2 color pickers.
Yeah, okay, so
which are
we've
below
got a stack panel with a grid in it, and then another stack panel beneath it. It's just a lot of yeah. I was struggling to find where we are. Okay. But you've given things names, which kind of helps navigate them, and that's sometimes a good reason to name things in the XAML. It's definitely better than adding a comment, but it often indicates maybe there could be a better way of doing things. We've got another spacing thing, specific widths on things, flyouts with more specific sizes. Okay, so we got more buttons. Yeah,
these are the buttons that show they show the icon of like a little QR code. I think that's what this glyph is. So this is a little QR code, and then when you click on it, it has a color picker flyout, and that changes the foreground color of the QR code, and it also changes the color of the button to give you a little bit of feedback.
Okay, yeah, let's go down a bit more. So we've got another button which looks very similar.
Yep, basically the same thing, different icon.
Yep.
So this is the background color. And it sets the background color. And then this is the combo box for error correction. I don't know how much you know about QR codes, but you can set different levels of error correction.
Yep.
And that's
So you've got another hard-coded width here. We'll come back on that one in a minute, but let's get to the bottom of the file.
all right. And then we have a border that houses our grid view, and this is where all of our codes are.
Okay. And then we get into the item template of the actual QR code.
Yep.
Which also has another context menu, or context flyout, with a bunch of options and a little info bar when...
This is a warning if you enter text in there that's actually not a URL.
You can have QR codes that aren't URLs, though.
Yep.
You know.
No, right, exactly.
But
you can turn off the turn off the warning.
Okay.
And that's the end of our item template.
And we have
these are the
more buttons for the bottom. 2 of them. So again, it's the two things are very similar.
Yep. So it's a split button
Slightly
with
different content. Yep.
Yep. Saving as PNG, and then this one's SVG. So they both they look and function the same, except one of them activates. Yeah, if you look at all these commands, save PNG, copy PNG, save SVG, copy SVG.
Okay, and we still got file to go.
Yep. And then down at the bottom, this is where these are the buttons to navigate to different pages. So this is where it'll read codes. This navigates to the read code, and this navigates to settings. And that's all the main content.
Oh, okay. And now we get the side panel.
Yeah. Oh, these are the buttons for the for this edge of the screen where the history toggle. So it toggles the history pane and the share app. So if you wanted to get a link that you can email someone, and then this is the info bar, what builds the share pane or the share app command. And this is an error if somebody puts so much text into a QR code that it cannot be seen. And then this is the history pane where we have a grid and a list of items that shows the code content, the color, foreground, background color.
Yeah. 400 odd lines. So two things. First of all, as you expected, we saw lots and lots of seeming repetition, but with some small differences. And some of that is content, but also some of the differences were like, well, the height of this is 18, but the height of the other one here is 16. Is that deliberate? Is that just something got changed once and now the two are different? It may or may not matter. Which is like a classic, sort of indicator that there might be a problem here when you change something in the future. Because I come in and want to add another button. Now, do I make the icon 18 pixels high or 16 pixels high? Why is there a difference? Why is there a difference? And what we want code that explains itself, because then we don't have that awkward, well, what do I change? Which bit do I copy? Why are these things different? We just want there to not be questions. So there's lots of that going on. And the other thing I said we'd come back to was the drop down for the error correction.
Yes. Right here. Combo box.
Error correction, combo box. That's the one, yeah. With a nice width of 136. And I'm sure on your screenshot, that looked fine. I ran the app on my machine and I couldn't see all the text. And the reason I couldn't see all the text is because I run my text scaling at 125% because I've got old man eyes and I like things a little bit bigger to make it easier for me to see them. One thing to be aware of is setting absolute widths for things which may change, and text can change because people like me come along and say, well, I need the text to be really big, so they make the text really big and suddenly you can't use the application or you can't see all the text or it looks really weird. We're going to start simple. So on line 270, we have this font icon, which has a font family and some weird glyph.
Yep.
I don't know how good your Unicode is and your knowledge of the Segoe. Is that symbol font theme family is Segoe icons, isn't it? Or Segoe fluent icons? But I look at that and I go, well, I don't know what that is. I even now have to go and look it up. Not ideal. Or I run the app and try and work it out. Again, not as being good as being able to look at it and go, well, I wish I just knew what that was.
I would agree.
If we look down, if we jump down sort of 14 lines, bottom of the screen, at line 284, we've got this symbol icon. It's a settings icon. I can be pretty confident. I can look at that code and know what it is. And I'd kind of hope that anyone could. So, there isn't a symbol icon for whatever this E66F. I can guess it's probably a scanning icon. So what if instead of your font icon, we just had call it my scan icon, just so we can be really clear. Hang on. We'll get there eventually. Here we go. So if we had something like that instead, which did exactly the same thing, it would be much easier to understand. Is it a scan icon? I don't know. And we'll put it in its own namespace because we're going to create a custom control for it. You happy to call it ScanIcon?
Yeah.
Or my ScanIcon?
ScanIcon. I think that should be fine.
ScanIcon's good. Okay. So I don't know if if you can see the changes as I do them here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new, okay. So for anyone watching, I'm in we're doing a weird share thing, and Visual Studio doesn't have all the features I would expect. Mm-hmm. But we're going to call this, what do we call it? ScanIcon.
Yep.
And we don't need to be clever. We'll just create a C# file. It's completely empty for now, so we probably need to give it a namespace. What is your default namespace? Let me just copy it from another file.
I think it's...
You've got underscores. I can't... Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I'm going to cheat. What if we did that? I have to tell it about the font icon. We'll have to tell it about some other things as well. What do we need to tell it about? Probably all of these. So what I'm doing is the lightest weight custom control I can do. And all I'm doing is inheriting for an existing control, and then setting some properties on it. So this is the same font family which you had in the XAML.
Yep.
The same value, but we're just giving it a name. So we've got this thing called ScanIcon now. I've used C as a... All right, so I can see you like longer... Oh, sorry, I'm up at the top of main page. So I can see on... and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an alias for that namespace. So I've called it controls because you seem to use longer names. I like really short namespace aliases just because it makes the text shorter, and I would normally use just a C for controls because that's my convention, because I like things short, but I've called it controls. So you can now see that we have a thing called ScanIcon, and now you can look at that code and you can see that's what that icon's supposed to be. So anyone could come along and go, oh yeah, that's the ScanIcon. If I needed a different icon, I could change it. It's like 3 lines of code, but does that make the code easier to read? I admit we're starting small, but we're going to ramp up to the bigger things.
I think it's great because I think when people think about like, oh, I have to make my own custom control, I have to like all the behaviors and all the weird elements and all the things, to your point about accessibility, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with controls that I don't want to have to build. And what you did here with ScanIcon is you just said, you know what? Inherit from font icon, set 2 properties, and we're done.
So that's nice and easy. So that was the simplest thing. Step 1. Let's get. I said we're making less code, so let's get rid of that.
Do we want to throw a commit down and say what we did? Is that how you like to?
We can do it however you want. Do you want to do that? Do you want to keep track of what we're doing?
Yeah, let's do it, because I have actually a new branch here called Breakout More XAML Controls.
Okay.
That just inherited from main, and I'm going to create a quick commit here and say created and use ScanIcon. Keeping it simple. I don't need to get into the details there.
Yeah, so there's lots of potential criticisms of what I've done. Lots of people don't like it. I like it because it makes the code simpler to read, and there are ways of generating those sorts of things if you really don't want to write that 3 lines of code yourself. But maybe we'll talk about that another day. So the next thing I noticed looking at this line, it's line 271 because we added a namespace alias, didn't we? So I see that this ScanIcon is in a view box with a height of 16, and then the other button immediately below is in a stack panel with a spacing of 10 and a horizontal orientation. the one below it has this weird padding. What's this weird padding about?
I'm not sure. I can't remember. Yeah. And I think this is part of your point here about making stuff more maintainable, which is all these mystery numbers are, you have to remember, and there's no comment. Obviously, you could dig back to the commits, but that might not even tell you.
So there's two things here. One is, I would say that we've got these two buttons which are basically the same, and maybe but the same structure but slightly different content. If you had two blocks of C# code which were basically the same with the bit of content, you'd extract that out, pull out a method, pull out a separate class or something to make those and not have that duplication. But also so we'll do that in a moment, from a XAML and a UI maintainability perspective, combining the visual things you see and the logic about how they're laid out leads to lots of problems. And I'd probably argue it's a violation of the single responsibility principle. Single responsibility things only have one reason to change.
Right.
Now, let's say this padding, the purpose of this padding, we don't know what it is, but let's say it was to put a certain amount of space between the two buttons. Now, if I need to add a third button, well, how do I handle the spacing for that? Ideally, I'd want something separate to be responsible for the positioning of the buttons and the spacing between them and all that sort of thing. And they're already in a container. All these buttons are in their own stack panel. And I would argue that stack panel or whatever equivalent control should be responsible for, this is how I position my contents, and then I take care of all the spacing between them and the layout and the alignment and whatever. They shouldn't have to deal with that themselves. So a good principle to have in mind, I bring it up because we've got this padding, but I suspect we don't really need that padding, so let's just get rid of it. For all intents and purposes, I'm pretty confident these two should be exactly the same in terms of how they look. Actually, the spacing of the one above has probably got, or maybe is related to the weird spacing on the one below. Who knows? Anyway, let's make another control. We're going to make controls. We're going to make a slightly more complex control this time. We did the really simple. I think let's start with the user control, but we're going to not be a user control. And what we're going to do is we're going to use it for this button. And this button currently contains a stack panel and a view box because it's doing an icon and text. So let's have an icon and text button. Okay, so we've got an icon and text button. And again, this is a user control. I'm going to jump into the code behind file. I'm going to get rid of all this comment nonsense it's added. And following on from what we did previously, I don't want to just inherit from user control. I want to make a button. I want it to generally do all the buttony things a button does.
Yep.
I just want to be able to put an icon and some text in it. So let's make this inherit from button as well. And what we need to do is we need to change the XAML file as well, so they both inherit from the same thing. And now it's just a button. So now we've got our own special button called button. Probably need to compile to make the squiggly go away. Lovely.
Yep. There we go.
And instead of grid, inside the button, as we had it in main page, can we put inside the XAML, we have a stack panel. Don't even get autocomplete, that's not going to be good. So it had an orientation.
Oh, you don't get IntelliSense?
I don't get IntelliSense. That's my excuse for all my bad typing. Well, actually, if when it squiggles, you can fix it. And so in this stack panel is going to be responsible for the distribution of the items within it. So we'll give it a spacing of 10. And now when we put our icon and our text inside, we don't need to think about how they should be positioned or how much space should be between them. This one controller is going to do it for all the instances. And so now in here, we need to put our view box. I can tab, that works at least. And also, we're going to have our text block, isn't it? Okay. So the other thing which our other control had was it had a height of 16. So all our icons are going to be the same. And now what we need is we need to put something in our view box, and that's a single child. And what we're going to do, so what I've done is I've added in below what we had before, or what was in the main page. So we've got a button, it's got a padding, we don't need to care about the command and the tooltip. well, we're still going to have a button, so we can keep using those in the same way. And it's these bits here. This is what we're reproducing. So the orientation and the spacing, yeah, I'll put them on one line. Then we've got our view box of the specified size, and then we've got some text, which we're now going to bind to. So we're going to end up with pretty much the same thing, but we've got these magical properties, which we're now going to add. And what we can do is just add those on the actual button control themselves, also the icon and text button control. So that's a snippet for creating a dependency property. The dependency property is as the comment says, a way of wiring up properties so that they can do things like binding. So we put the property on this control, and we had two. Let's do text first because that's the simplest one. So instead of an int property or an int type, we want this to be a string. You hit tab, and let's call this text.
And what do I put here for owner class? So
this is the icon and text button. It'd be nice if it sort of completed that itself. And the other thing we need to do is change the default value on the property. So it's not a 0 made sense if it was an int, but we're a string, so we'll probably just want to be null or empty string. That's fine. And now we had another property, which was I called the icon. So why don't you create another one of those? And so what we want here is this is what's going to go inside the view box. And in the apples we have it at the moment, we've got either a font icon or our things that inherit from font icons, so they're still font icons, or a symbol icon, and all those have a common ancestor of a UI element. So let's make this a UI element, and in theory we could put anything in, and it would or pretty much any visual thing in, and it would get squeezed down into a 16 by 16 view box. And our default value want to be null, I think, for this. That was easy, wasn't it? We've now made our custom button.
Awesome.
What we're doing by making them dependency properties, we can bind the values into them. So let's jump back to the main page. We now have a thing called text. So we can have a specific value in here, like we have at the moment, or because it's a dependency property, we could bind to it as well. So we could either with a binding or an X bind, some VM property, but we just want this to say settings. And then inside our icon and text, we had a icon.
Okay, yeah.
When we don't get autocomplete, let's just put our symbol icon in there, and now I don't think we need the thing. Yeah.
But we can remove it and see what we get.
So what we should probably do, let's run the app now and just make sure that all still works and does everything it did before. We can see our ScanIcon hasn't changed as well.
Right, yeah. All right, I'm building it locally here. This is the XAML live preview, and you can see how that's what happens when we removed those magic strings. So now we know what those did from the...
so that's what that weird margin was about, was it? Was it a margin or a padding?
I think it was padding, yeah, because you wanted to fit like the other one. So now what happens, I'm going to go in here real quick and do a live edit. Let me, is it going to go away for me? And I'm going to remove this. Save. And now I'm going to go back to the XAML preview. And there we go. So we removed it and we put it back. I'm not gonna argue. I think it's simpler now.
Yeah. So I think the padding 0 on the button got rid of it, and then the padding you put on the whatever the other control was before put that spacing back.
Yep. But I will say I do notice something here. Do you see what I see? The buttons don't have the same style.
Oh.
I wonder why that is.
I wonder if there is an implicit style on the regular button which isn't getting picked up by the icon and text button, would be my guess. So if you go to the Live Property Explorer, right-hand window, right-hand side.
Live Property Explorer.
We've got nothing selected. If you click on something in the Live Property preview,
click on
it.
So this is the icon style button now that I selected. There's no name.
Yeah.
And what should we search for? Style? I guess we see here. Style, default. Stretch that out a little bit.
Up the button default.
And yep. So that's style button default. Now what if I go back to the live preview here? and I click on the button, and then I go to the Live Property Explorer and see what that style is. That is just style button. That, I think you called that out at the very beginning. So this style does not flow down. I'm going to stop. So that does not flow down into our custom control, right? Style. Was that a static?
Static resource, I imagine.
Button reveal, default button style. Let's see if that did it. Let's see if that was enough. And there was also the height of 32. And that was another magic number there.
Yep.
Which we can try to eliminate that and see if we can improve the accessibility of the application while we're
So
at
that
it.
wasn't being applied to our new button, the icon on text button, and it still seemed to be coming out the size you wanted.
All right. What do you know? Look at that.
I can't tell until you zoom in. Hooray! Oh, well spotted.
So they now look the same. That's awesome. So I'd say that was a success. So if you have styles in your file, they do not flow down into the controls that you create. We have to go into our custom control, apply the style here.
Yeah. Or we could do it at an app level or a page level. It wouldn't have to be on the individual control.
Yeah.
So
great.
I did that to one of the buttons. Why don't you change the other one?
All right. So I'm going to go back to the XAML page. So you did the settings one, and I think I'm going to do that to
read codes one.
Read codes. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to make a new one above it. Icon and text button control. Icon. I'm just going to open that up first, and then I can move our scan icon inside of the icon.
Yep.
So this is the icon property that we made.
Yep.
And I need to set the text, which is set here, read codes. I'm going to copy that, paste it, and I'm going to move the command and the tooltip. So those also need to move over. And if you're wondering why everything, and when I hit save, it aligns everything, it's because I'm using the XAML styler extension.
Okay.
Okay, so I moved the text into our property. I have the icon and moved the command over. That's great.
It doesn't look like we've dramatically reduced the number of lines of code, especially where you've got the parameters all on different things. But what we've done is we've taken a button with a stack panel, with a view box, with an icon and a separate text block, and now we just have two things.
Mm-hmm.
We have a button and an icon. And another property for the thing. So we have reduced things a bit. I think the syntax of the XAML with setting the properties for the icon properties makes it look a lot bigger than before. But beyond the total number of elements and attributes in the document, what we've got is something that is hopefully much clearer about what it intends to be.
Yeah.
So I've got this thing. It's an icon and text button. I really struggle to find people who don't know what that should be.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what an icon and text button is supposed to do, maybe this isn't for you. And also, we've got rid of a lot of those magic numbers, so that's a win. And we've got rid of some of the inconsistency as well, where some things were set on one instance, some things were not set on the other. If we wanted to add another button now, I think anyone could do that pretty easily. You wouldn't have to have a lot of knowledge of this application to be able to do that.
Right.
That's hopefully good for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is one page. So I didn't go through every single page of the app, but spoiler alert, there are other pages with icon and text buttons. And I'm going to go into those pages and I'm going to use this new control and reuse it again. And so if I go back and want to make an improvement or some other change, I can make that change in this one place and it will work in all of those places.
Yeah, and if you wanted to change the design of the application, and maybe you wanted the icons to be bigger or all the icons to be a color or something, you could do that in one place and not have to do it in all the different places in all the different files where you were previously doing that. So hopefully that makes it easier to maintain. The same way you would extract reused code from your C# file, we've just extracted a bit of logic about how I present a text and a button, or a button with an icon and a bit of text on it. Again, it's really simple stuff, but we're kind of trying to start simple and build up.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to make a commit. So far, so good. What's next?
Again, let's kind of make a step up in a bit more complexity. Let's go to the next level, which is a little bit more complex still. And that is what we see in the history list. So if we jump down to the bottom of the file.
So this is where you can open that side pane, and it's just a list of all of the QR codes that you've made in the past.
Do you want to run it up so we can see what it looks like?
Yeah. All right.
I don't know. That just...
and I guess
it's a little bit more to visualize than just a you know, an icon and a bit of text. But while that's starting up, obviously, item template is a great bit of logic to remove and put in a separate file because it should be a standalone bit of logic. And where it's big like this, so here it's like a good sort of 20% of the file, and it's not key to the main page logic in its all. So I think it makes a great excuse for
And now that I've made a QR code, I click this.
You have to save it to appear in the thing, don't you?
And now it appears, and we can see how it is the text. So hello, hello. You can see the foreground color is this box. The background color is this box. We have a history. So isn't it nice that we have a history of our code so we don't have to remember exactly what that hex code was. When you click it, it repopulates. Boom. So this is one item control here. Ooh, there's a lot. The selected element. And we want to take all of that and turn that into a control.
Yeah, that's the plan. Okay.
Great.
So let's start by adding a new user control.
And I'm going to go to Solution, Controls, Add New Item. And what should we call this? A history row? History row item?
Yep. I think there is a class called HistoryItem already, isn't there? I think that's what's in the view model. Yes, in the models there is a history item, so calling it something slightly different.
Yeah, let's call it, history row item. Okay, so this is the XAML. And if we go into the C#, I'm actually going to run the code cleanup and eliminate all those unnecessary usings.
Okay,
and that comment.
A bunch of them back.
All right.
Where are you? You're in the history item. Well, yeah, okay, we're in the code behind. What we're going to want to do is bind the data to this item. So let's create a dependency property called data.
This is a history item. We're going to call it data.
Yeah.
Tab. And the type owner class is history row item.
History row item, yeah.
And the default value is
null.
Null.
For everyone who doesn't like nulls, then we could do something different. What you need some system.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to our main page. Grab that grid that was inside the data template.
So everything inside of the data template. So 1 for 1. Let's go.
So we're missing a few namespace aliases. We're gonna want. We'll see down here that there is some use of converters. There is the use of some other.
Got it. So I'm going to use this.
We're going to want the models and convert.
Models and converters, right? Yeah, I'll do models, converters. Okay.
And so actually, we're going to use that converter. So at the top of main page, there is.
That's right. We needed to.
In the resources, we want the color to brush converter is the only one we're going to use.
Okay, so here we want to use and make a user control resources.
Yeah, now if this converter was being used in multiple places in the app, you might want to put it in the app level resources, but I think for now, for here, we're fine. And now let's go down and let's see what we've got. So with our text block at the top, we got a nice little green squiggly under our codes content.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that's doing is Xbind is looking at the properties of the control, and there isn't a codes content property on the control. We've got a data property. So let's just bind to data, and within data is actually our codes content. And we'll see that also down below, we've got other green squigglies under binding things. So for the other text block and the foreground and the background fill, we also need to set that as well. Is it worth just quickly opening that HistoryItem class just to show that so it's clear?
Let's do it. F12. So there's a saved, date, time, and this is where I'm using the humanizer package to say that, 5 minutes ago or whatever. And then we have the content. This is where we have the error correction level, and we're returning that as a string, just HLQ. Barcode format. This is
some other things as well, but
yep,
we don't need to care about those right now. Yeah, but those are the properties which we were binding to in our control. So we've got our HistoryRowItem is a representation of this history item, and we've just mapped all the properties through. So what we can do is go back to our main page. We ripped out that grid at the bottom. You can comment that out for now if you wish, but what would we create? We create new controls. Yeah, don't even need me for this. And you can just xbind. You can leave it blank. You can set it to a dot. It's the whole of the item. Doing the whole.
So this, the data type here is history item, and since we're already bound to a collection of history items, within here is a history item, and we're saying bind to that history item.
Yeah. Why don't you run it, and we'll deal with why it doesn't work. But
I'm excited.
Okay. There's a subtle nuance we have to deal with.
Those subtle nuances are honestly why, when I'm building the app, and I build it all on one page, and it works, and then you go and try to pull it, you make any little change, and it's like a giant Jenga tower, and the whole thing falls apart, and you have no idea why. Okay, I'm going to pull up the XAML preview so you can see the app running. I'm going to open it, and we can see we do not have the content coming in. The 9 minutes ago is working, so somehow it's binding to the time, but we're not getting the color or the code's content. So I'm going to switch back. Should I switch back to code?
Let's go back to the XAML file in our custom control.
All right.
Now, so one of these bindings was working and the rest weren't. So let's look at the one that was working and see what's different.
So I think that would be
different.
This one, save date as string.
Yeah.
One way?
Yes. So this has a binding mode specified. That's why this one works, but the other one doesn't. So before, it didn't actually need this. If you go to the older version, it would have worked fine without that. But the default binding mode for an xbind is one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that when the item is created and it tries to set the property, it will look at it initially to see what the value should be. When it created the control, it didn't yet have a data context or a binding context. It was only after it was created and that property data was applied that the property that became some data to show. But at that point, it had already done that. Well, I've done it one time. I'm not going to look for any changes. However, if we set the one-way property or the one-way mode, when that data is changed, it will get updated to the UI. So by setting the binding mode on all of those xbinds, if we run it now, it should work. He says, fingers crossed. Did that explanation make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, good.
But those are the frustrating things of, I can see it. I literally copied a working XAML code. I copied it into its own file, and now it doesn't work. And why?
And so the reason it worked before is because it was creating the item when it had the data.
Got it.
So now it's creating the item, and we're setting the data on it.
Hey, look at that.
So we have to account for xbind. If we'd been using binding rather than the xbind, I think it would have just worked.
Okay.
Because the two are slightly different. Because xbind is optimized for performance, and so if you don't have to worry about things changing, that's a bit faster.
Now, so is there like a really lightweight way that we could maybe make this as a local style or something else to improve that? I like this. I think this is a nice little compromise where we're basically saying we want these two rectangles to be the same size inside of this stack panel and leave it at that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of our scope of thinking.
It's not an approach for everyone, and I can see times where you just really couldn't be bothered. But I think for the case of trying to explain the principle of we want all these rectangles to be the same size and the same width.
Mm-hmm.
Let's define it once. I mean, if we were doing this in C#, I don't think there would be as much pushback on the, well, we're setting this thing twice, let's extract it to a constant and reference it in both places, that sort of thing. Okay, you like it though, that's good.
Yeah, I like it. I like that's a nice middle ground between extracting a control and then also, like, on one side is every property on every control, and on the other side is every single repetition is extracted out as a custom control, and that seems excessive to me. But I like this as a middle ground. Should we commit? So we have extracted the history row item. And this, I think you said earlier that anytime you see an item template, that is a great opportunity for pulling out as a custom control.
It's definitely a strong candidate, yeah. It's arguably an isolated piece of logic. And if you had an isolated piece of logic in any other language, you go, well, that's a class, that's a bit of code, I should have that on its own. And we've got this main page, which is, by our own admittance, very big, or bigger than we would like, and we've got this isolated bit of logic. It makes sense just to pull that out, extract it, and keep that self-contained.
Mm-hmm. This one was pretty straightforward, right? We copied it over, we maybe fixed some data binding. The events and the things that occur when you click on that are basically just on the row itself. When the selection changes, update. There's another item template here in this file that is, I would say, maybe the meat and potatoes of this app, and that is this grid view, which has an item template, which is the barcode image item. That's a whole thing. I mean, it's a lot. It's got logic in here. It's got, you can see we have commands that are navigating back up to the path of the view model to be able to call, saving out the PNG. So this seems like a lot. And I think we've kind of made a very short toolkit maybe to say, whenever things are the same, they look the same, we can extract those out as controls. But this one, I think there's a lot more tight coupling. So it's a candidate for refactoring, but I think it's going to be a lot more work than the other controls that we've done in this call.
Yeah, so some of the logic in there is it's assuming that it exists within that page, and it's looking within the item template. You're accessing the view model as a whole, so that's the view model for the whole page, and you've got interaction between different items within the template and things outside the template as well, just to make it a bit more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got events as well as commands in there, as we talked about earlier.
That's right. Yeah.
So a drag starting event, that's going to be fun to play with.
Yeah. So I can shed a little bit of light on why I did this, and part of it is if you can actually drag these individual QR codes straight to folders or straight into your design apps or wherever you want them, which is great, but it's going to make refactoring this a real pain in the butt. So I think that's going to be episode 2. What do you think?
That sounds like a good plan to me.
Great. All right. Well, next time we'll tackle it.
Okay.
Awesome.